Reading 51 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 2. Berlip, December 23, 1944. On taking in impressions in a new way. Of the three foods that enter the human machine, impressions in the top compartment, air in the second, and ordinary food in the lowest, the work constantly emphasizes that the food of impressions is the most important food. You must understand that from the work point of view, the food of impressions is the most important food of all. Ordinarily, people can live with ordinary food and air and very few impressions. But if a man begins to work on himself, he must think a great deal about what it means to take in more impressions. One way to take in more impressions is to try to look at things without associations. This is a very interesting method. Another way is to see everything happening in life in the light of the work. That is, to bring the work up to the place of incoming impressions. Another way is to see personality acting in oneself. You will find for yourselves as you go on in the work many ways of taking in impressions to a greater extent. But you must remember that everything tends to become mechanical. In consequence, if you can find a way of taking in impressions more fully, you must not expect it to continue to give results. One has to be clever. One has to have a number of irons in the fire, as Mr. O once said. That is, different methods at different times. Now, if we could make personality passive, I say if, then impressions would fall on essence, which lies behind personality. This would give us a great deal of force. Everything would look much fresher, much more brilliant, much more interesting. As we are mechanical, we cease to take in new impressions often at a very early stage in our lives. We take in simply the same impressions over and over again. We see everything in exactly the same way, and we take one another in exactly the same way. Of course, if you can manage to see a person you know without any associations, you will get a shock. You see a quite different person. In the same way, if we begin to see ourselves, if we can get behind ourselves through self-observation, we will again get a shock. We will realize we do not know ourselves and are quite different from what we thought. You remember the strange esoteric phrase in the Gospels where Christ is talking about what is necessary for work on oneself? He is really speaking about the personality. He says, quote, "Whosoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a little child, he shall in no wise enter therein." Here we must think about the idea of this work, namely, becoming conscious. I would like to speak about personality, that is, the acquired part of us, and remind you of a few things. Everyone has this built-up personality with its own viewpoints, likes and dislikes, customs, attitudes, and so on. Can any of you see that you have a machine of this kind, and that what is you is not it? In each country, quite different kinds of personality have become ingrained. A Chinese is quite different from an Englishman, yet each will take his personality as absolute truth, absolute right. If you can catch a glimpse of what I mean, it may help you to see what personality is in yourself. Now, as was said, if personality becomes more passive, impressions begin to fall on essence. This makes it possible for essence to grow, an extraordinary experience. As long as impressions fall on personality, they will always produce the same effects mechanically. But when they begin to fall on essence, everything is always new and far richer and more varied. In fact, everything is wonderful. Instead of having the feeling that everything is repeating itself, everything is the same, one begins to feel that nothing is ever the same. But one condition that is necessary is that one lives more in the moment and notices those forces coming at the moment, and so takes in impressions from the actual moment. If one is always living in imagination or in the past, this is impossible. When we are in the personality and only react in set, stereotyped, mechanical ways to every moment, we soon feel a strange staleness, a deadness in ourselves. We are making no attempt to take in new impressions. We are really in a person that has been formed in us and that we think is ourself. The most interesting thing is that people say, "How can I think differently? How can I feel differently?" When this is the whole point of the work. If you cannot observe how you react, then of course nothing can be changed. If you cannot or will not take in any new ideas, again, nothing can be changed. If you think that you can retain your former ways of thinking and feeling and estimating things and simply add something new to yourself as you are, then again, you cannot change. It is you that has to change, and you are just how you mechanically think and feel about everything. That is you. Have you then begun to observe this you, this person who thinks, feels, and acts as always? Are you satisfied with this acquired you?